how stupid you look.
Whatever.
Ow! Ow!
What the fuck? So, for better or for worse, I have played a lot of SpongeBob video games in my years. Way too many. What started off as a nice little nostalgia throwback to Battle for Bikini Bottom to hype up the release of the remake, Rehydrated, spun into this rabbit hole that I don't think I've recovered from.
Who lives in a pineapple under the sea?
Me, because I've been drowning in SpongeBob games since 2020, so that year is traumatic for me for multiple reasons. I have played a lot of SpongeBob SquarePants video games over these last couple of years, and hey, the Cosmic Shake is getting me in the mood to give the aquatic one another go. I was lucky enough to receive a review code for that game, I plowed through it in only a couple of sittings, and I had a really fun time. By now, you kind of already know if you like it or not, but the question remains, did I like it more than Battle for Bikini Bottom or its remake Rehydrated? Is Battle for Bikini Bottom still the king around here? What a tough question. That then led me to remembering just how toxic most of the video games with this IP were. So, including all of the games I played for the retrospective, as well as a few more that I didn't play for that retrospective that I added on after the fact that I've played since then, we have a total of 37 entries on this list with more than 37 games. Whew. And before anyone calls me out for being a liar, I do say every SpongeBob game, but realistically, it's every with a big ol' asterisk. So much like the retrospective, these are SpongeBob exclusive games, so no crossovers like Nickelodeon Kart Racers, and no mobile games are gonna be in here. There's gonna be no, like, weird PC Flash games. Like, it's just not gonna happen. Do you really need my opinion on Doodle Jump SpongeBob Edition? We're sticking to consoles, handhelds, and some PC games. If we went beyond that, we would be here forever. There would be like 100 games, and they would all be bad. It would be a total waste of time. Do you really need me to tell you about Fists of Foam for the Didge? I don't even know what the f a Didge is. But speaking of things that you may not know, here's something that you should know. Today's episode is sponsored by Bai. Listen, knowing my audience, I feel like there's a good chunk of you out there interested in some Japanese goods, something like an import video game here or there, perhaps? If you're ever interested, you go into the American site of your choice, you look for the thing that you want, and what, these prices? Ew, gross. Yucky. What you gotta do is jump on over to Bai instead, the service that will place the bid on an auction or just a straight up purchase order from sites like Mercari, Rakuten, Amazon Japan, Yahoo Japan Shopping and Auction, and more. You settle on the transaction, Bai will buy the products for you, and from there they will prepare it for international shipping straight to you, no matter where in the world you are. And you don't gotta deal with any ludicrous price hikes from the other sites. Hey, look at that. You can get some Japanese versions of SpongeBob games on there. That's a big old pile of neat. And listen here, the big seller, if you click the link in the description below and create a new account, you will get a 2,000 yen coupon on your very first purchase. That is literally just free money for you to purchase something. Come on now, that's great. Thank you to Bai for sponsoring the video, been a fan of these guys for a while, but now, time for a lot more Sponge. Surf and Skate Road Trip for the DS. What an unholy war crime this game turned out to be. The frame rate, oh my god, this frame rate. I wish it was the video being bad, but no, this is how it is. This is a handheld version of a console game, so right out of the gate, it's expected to be a little bit rougher around the edges than its console counterpart, but this just straight up feels like it's not finished. And quite frankly, even if the game did feel like it was properly optimized for the really powerful Nintendo DS, it likely wouldn't change anything. It's just a series of mind-numbing sports-themed minigames all about racking up points, and that's about it. Again, if we start counting random mobile games or flash games from the old Nick.com website, then maybe this isn't the worst one out there, but for actual consoles, rock, bottom. Revenge of the Flying Dutchman, GBA. The Game Boy Advance is home to many SpongeBob games, and naturally, they're all side-scrollers. That's about what that console is able to handle. But what makes this one particularly bad is its focus on exploration, while simultaneously being incredibly obnoxious to explore. Gathering these different types of bubbles to handle different types of blocks is a fine enough idea, but when you can only hold one type at a time, and required collectibles need specific types, and you gotta memorize the level designs, filled with no interesting set pieces, and then you have to go back, get this one bubble type to get to this one wall, it's bad. It's just a load of barnacles. But shout out to the coin sound effect being basically the same as the Starbit sound from Mario Galaxy. Great. Surf and Skate Road Trip for the Xbox 360. Ever since I initially dismissed this game's existence in my original retrospective, I have had the, I don't know if pleasure is the right word to use. I've played a little bit of the 360 version and, yep, don't like it. It's a Kinect game, and quite frankly, I'm convinced there is not a single game with that device that I will ever find good. The controls never feel natural, menu navigation is a pain, and even if normal controls were an option with the controller, it then just boils down to a series of, once again, poorly done sports levels, this time more similar to Tony Hawk Downhill Jam levels to go for a high score, and that's it. This is really only not at the bottom of the list because on a console now, it looks kinda decent. That's the most praise I'll give it. Sorry, Kinectians. It took one session of Surf and Skate Road Trip and Hulk Hogan's main event to realize that this controller-free gaming thing just ain't my thing. Plankton's Robotic Revenge for the DS. So this is one of those games that got a port on nearly every single console under the sun at the time, but while all of those versions, including the 3DS version, are more or less identical, the DS version specifically... Oh no, Spongy Boy me Bob, what happened? This is just an incredibly slow and mindless top-down shooter where nothing happens, and you can tell this game was made to meet a quota rather than to actually make something decent. Not to dismiss the art style either, the game is about as ugly as homemade soup. Considering the console versions at least have multiplayer potential and this one is single player only, it's clear why this specific version is lower on the list. Not like I would be able to convince friends to play Plankton's Robotic Revenge on the DS anyway. Hero Pants. I will give them credit, they did take another stab at the simple multiplayer SpongeBob game idea with this one, and it is kinda cute at times. They can turn into a superhero as a mechanic, and Sandy turns into a realistic squirrel. That's funny. Kinda. I mean, again, it is meant for multiplayer, I understand that, but in order to convince friends or family or enemies to play with you, it's gotta be at least kinda fun single player, and this super slow platformer with brain dead puzzle solving while the characters just constantly mouth off one-liners, yeah, no, it's not happening. It's really no surprise that in the SpongeBob timeline, there wouldn't be a single game released on consoles for years after Hero Pants. It couldn't even win the 2016 Kids' Choice Awards for Favorite Video Game of the Year, and that should really tell you something. Underpants Slam for the 360. This Xbox Live Arcade title got the backward compatibility treatment for some reason, so I finally got to play it. And dude, this game is such mega bubble bass. I at least thought, looking at screenshots, it would be like a proper 2D platformer or something that's level based, but nope. You get thrown into a confined location and you gotta collect 100 underpants. Just don't die, and that's it. I thought there would be something more to this, but no, that's it. I thought I was going crazy, but that's the entire game. You just unlock more stages to collect more underpants in, and that's really the whole game. I'm stunned. Clearly, like the previous games, there was a focus on multiplayer here, but it's just the characters jumping around, picking up shiny things and avoiding jellyfish. Who's gonna be down for this? And judging by the immediate rejection of trying to find a game online, clearly the answer is nobody. Phil Spencer, why did you allow me to play this on my Series X? I don't understand. Plankton's Robotic Revenge for console and 3DS. This one does get some extra points for at least being kinda more visually competent, and yes, if you have your friends along and you give them enough money, you can play it multiplayer too. But it doesn't change the fact that this remains a very slow and lifeless shooter with very bland mechanics for literally everything it tries to do. It is painful. The shooting is boring, the platforming is boring, the level designs and the themes are just so boring. What was the creative process with this? The answer was there was none. I'm sure some kids out there had a pleasant nostalgic experience with this, but honestly, this is overall just a miserable time trying to capitalize on the likes of, I don't know, Ratchet and Clank All for One, Disney Universe. There was a very specific pocket in time where this game made sense. It was like when all the Lego games were happening. I guess this sort of fits into that mold, but I don't know. It's bad. This ain't bold and brash. It belongs in the trash. Krabby Quest. There is a whole weird world out there of vintage SpongeBob games that are PC exclusive, and quite frankly, like, none of them are really all that good. It's a world of advanced darkness down there, and I don't recommend jumping in. If you ever saw SpongeBob SquarePants back in the day and thought a derivative block-pushing puzzle game was the key to success, then I don't know what to tell you, but I don't think that was true. I almost hesitate to call this a game. It's an incredibly simple piece of software for old PCs, and that's about it. But what sets this above the rest is, I don't want to die while playing it. And quite frankly, these bottom of the list games really do take a toll on your psyche. So, Krabby Quest, it exists. Nighty Nightmare and Operation Krabby Patty. So one interesting thing about the world of old school PC SpongeBob games is there are a shocking amount of point and click games, dude. These two in particular are the less interesting of the point and click family, but they're still kind of interesting. Movement is very slow, the visuals are very boring. There is some variety with like some mini games that pop up from time to time, but generally these don't really succeed at much and mostly fall into the camp of, well, I had this game as a kid, so listen, alright, you can't tell me a game where you attack fake Patricks with the real Patrick's tongue is one of the games of all time. I won't believe you, I'm sorry. Both games do try to do something different when it comes to the atmosphere and tone, but honestly, I think it's impossible to say that one is better than the other here. But god, man, shoutouts to the CGI cutscenes. These are some of my favorite 3D models of all time. That's where the opening bit comes from. It comes from Operation Krabby Patty, and it is... God, I love this. Put both of these games in a museum. I would take an entire cartoon that looks like this. Boating Bash for the DS. The driving in this game is admittedly kind of interesting. Instead of being a traditional Mario Kart clone like you would come to expect, it's all done with the touchscreen to aim in the direction that you want to go. Pretty cool, that's not really something that you see ever, so I like that part. And there's also other aspects of driving here too that aren't just plain racing. Like destruction is an option as well. You just run into things and you kill them dead. That's kind of fun. The ambition certainly doesn't go unappreciated, however, sacrificing the tactile feeling of controlling a car the way every other video game does ever makes this more of a cute little novelty rather than something that's really worth sinking your teeth into. There is a wide gap between the console version and the portable version, and it's pretty clear to see why. The Yellow Avenger. When I last played this game for the retrospective, I said that I didn't really know what this game was all about. Yeah, after returning to it, I think that still applies. What appears to be a traditional side-scrolling platformer is actually more of a... I don't know, man. It's like a never-ending series of fetch quests in the style of a side-scrolling platformer. There is an overarching plot about helping Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy and helping out a bunch of other people infected by dirty bubbles, but so much time is spent just simply running around in circles around Bikini Bottom, accepting and completing quests from random civilians. I don't understand what this game's trying to do. Doesn't matter which of the two handhelds you play the game on, it controls fine enough, but too much time is felt feeling aimless. Yellow Avenger isn't a horrendous experience once things kinda click, it's just difficult to know what the developers are trying to achieve in the first place. The Legend of the Lost Spatula. Okay, so like, this game isn't good, but as time passes, I'm finding this Game Boy Color aesthetic a lot more charming, and I think that's why I dare put this game this high on the list. Finally, the world of Bikini Bottom in the palm of your hands. Firmly grasp your Game Boy Color and let's go. It's beautiful. Similar to the Yellow Adventure, this game has a bit of an open world sort of vibe as a side-scrolling platformer, but with the platforming and the exploration a lot faster paced. And honestly, it's funnier given how ugly everything is and how stupidly high SpongeBob jumps. This game is completely unhinged and I am all here for it because like there's moments when you'll find a treasure chest and open it and then it just says April Fools. That's it, go on with your day. Also, all this time has passed and I still don't know what Mrs. Puff's problem is. She does not look okay. The big one, Beach Party Cook-Off, sitting here at number 25. I mean, I understand Cooking Mama was popular at the time, so having a SpongeBob-themed cooking game on the same console, it does make sense. You gotta cook a bunch of food in a fast enough time to have the privilege to cook for Jack Kahuna Laguna's famous beach party. And naturally, simple touchscreen minigames were the way to go. The most unfortunate thing about this game is that it's not even all that bad necessarily. Like, yes, it is incredibly simplistic and never really ramps up in pure difficulty, but it could have been so much better if it wasn't for the fact that each of the episodes drag on for far too long. You get the gist of what it is you need to do within like 10 seconds, but then it goes on for minutes, and then you're just drained by the time you have to do another episode. The combination of the repetition, the simplicity, and just how long it takes to finish a level results in the first game on this list that genuinely feels like a missed opportunity. Sorry, Jack Kahuna Laguna, I don't even care about your dumb, stupid beach party. Krusty Cook-Off Extra Krusty Edition for the Switch. So, I'll be honest, I did immediately turn this game away when I did the retrospective because it's a mobile game ported to the Switch. I just figured that it would be gross and we would move on. All fun, no grind, huh? Yay? But I did want to give the game a proper shot and damn it, I actually kind of like it. The SpongeBob theming is definitely whatever. I'm not even making Krabby Patties in this one, I'm making pancakes for some dumb reason. All this window dressing is just the means to pump out one of those fast-paced restaurant simulators like Diner Dash or something. Customers will come in, you gotta manage your different resources in a timely manner to get the most points possible, and you unlock things in between rounds to make things easier. And that process does give you a bit of a serotonin boost. In the context of this list though, Beach Party Cook-Off walked so that Krusty Cook-Off can run. The faster pace and quicker rounds makes this way more digestible than the game that we mentioned previously. And yeah, that is technically another bright side, no microtransactions or grinding. I mean, that's nice. Although there is supposed to be, there's like a section for an in-game shop, but it doesn't seem to work, so good. Creature from the Krusty Krab DS. One of the things with every version of Creature from the Krusty Krab is everything feels like an insane fever dream. You just have to expect these games in particular to be batshit insane. But what makes this version particularly bad was, of course, because it's a DS game, you don't directly control the characters, they move automatically, and with the touchscreen, you influence their movement instead. And they move so damn slow. It's not like a game like this can't inherently work, but in this situation, it is such a slog that if you were to experience anything Creature from the Krusty Krab related, this is, far and away, the worst way to do so. And it was developed by WayForward. I'm telling you, man, this whole thing is a fever dream. Super Sponge PS1. The very first ever console release for the franchise. And it's a run-of-the-mill 2D platformer. Listen, it's not my fault that these side-scrollers are so close together on this list, they're all very much the same. But, finally, we have a traditional level-based platformer now, thank King Neptune. We jumped from having a couple below-average open-world platformers to a below-average level-based one. I'm so thrilled. There's definitely some novelty to this looking like a cursed Windows 98 screensaver, but when you really boil it down, at its best, it's an average platformer with the sponge aesthetic, and at its worst, you got mechanics like the reef blower that feel terrible, and I would likely do anything else outside of playing the games below this. Of course. Many old cartoon licensed games just feel like standard platformers with the IP assets just splashed all over it. During this era specifically, there were a bunch of franchises that broke away from that trend, specifically in the 3D space, but right here, that's what we have right here? Nah, it's not good. Battle for Bikini Bottom, Lights, Camera, Pants, Employee of the Month, and the movie game all for PC. So, similar to the previous point-and-click PC games, here we have 4 adventures that play exactly the same. Point-and-clicks of the traditional adventure game variety this time, and hey, wouldn't you know it, these 4, as well as the 2 from the previous entry, all come from Aw Games. Aw, man. These guys kept super busy in the early 2000s with all of these SpongeBob games, and honestly, I respect the hustle. But yeah, regarding these 4 games, they are all basically identical. Sure, different plots and locations, of course, but unless I state otherwise, you probably can't tell any specific game apart from this group. But this traditional adventure game genre really suits the style of SpongeBob way more. You got plenty of characters to talk to, when all 4 games are combined you have a ton of varied locations to explore, and naturally there are some mini-games to spice things up too. It's fine. These are fine experiences. The genre isn't for everybody. I kind of think that this format can get repetitive very quickly, but for what they are really charming ways to explore Bikini Bottom. And, once again, I am in love with these CG character models. Oh my god, tell me you don't love these too. They are my new favorite thing. In-game Flying Dutchman though, on the other hand, oh god. Obstacle Odyssey 1 and 2. Now this one totally took me off guard since I didn't even touch this one for my retrospective, but I'll be damned. Some old school PC exclusive SpongeBob games that I actually kinda liked. Essentially, this Obstacle Odyssey duo is like a mediocre platformer take on Super Monkey Ball, I guess. Sets of platforms floating in the sky, you collect some items and get to the end. There's a time limit. I mean, I really don't know why SpongeBob's name is here. Quite frankly, you could throw in Doug into this instead and it would make just as much sense. These may also be the worst SpongeBob models I've ever seen in my entire life. And yes, that is to this game's benefit. It's really symbolic of the SpongeBob video game franchise that this series of games is roughly halfway up the list, but hey man, I found a cute little hidden gem in the process. Criminy Jim Jim, we call that an absolute win. Revenge of the Flying Dutchman on console. Finally, the first entry on this list that feels like a true 3D platformer. Obviously, as time has gone on, the cracks in this game specifically have started to show in not so glorious fashion. It's often rough on the eyes, mechanics feel very rough, my game crashed, so I never even got around to beating it, that was fun. As it stands though, this is the best way to experience Under the Sea on this list yet. There is still a novelty to working with this game's most bare basic platformer tropes, like completing missions and collecting shiny things, that's about it. There's not like a whole lot of thought put into the rest of it, but by God, this game certainly is a 3D platformer. It's just a generally unremarkable adventure with way too many mindless roaming around quests for its own good. It results in a game that's oddly eerie and sort of dreamlike more than a genuine platformer. Very interesting historically and not the worst game on the planet, but for what's going to come out after this game, yeah, this spot on the list is definitely deserved. Alright, you made it to the halfway point. Did you expect, like, all the games so far to be all the bad ones? Of course you did. You already know what I'm going through. It's a lot of pain, and you guys like to see me in pain. But stay tuned to the end, because I know you want to see where Cosmic Shake stands up compared to everything else, and you may not know. It may catch you off guard, it may be what you totally expected. We won't know until we get there, but just word of advice. What doesn't kill you usually succeeds in the second attempt. So be careful out there. Atlantis SquarePants for the Game Boy Advance. The most commendable thing about the GBA version of this game was that not only is it a platformer all about buddying up two characters at all times, that's kinda different, but the game also goes out of its way to make sure that all 4 playable options actually play differently. It leads to a game that actually requires some thought to figure out which character or set of characters is best to utilize for the puzzles that are in front of you, and that's nice. And you know what? The minigames, there's a bunch of them. They're not that bad either. It's still otherwise uninteresting with no discerning set pieces and far too much meandering around for its own good, but you can tell that we're finally getting to the point in this list where things are starting to feel, you know, a little bit more like an actual playable video game. We're making progress here, folks. Lights, Camera, Pants for the Game Boy Advance. That kinda rhymed. Some of the same praise as the previous game can be applied here as well. We got a platformer with multiple characters to play as, each with their own skills, and it plays better. Hooray. However, the platforming is still pretty dull. This is one of those platformers that does, for a fact, guarantee some platforming, but chances are pretty high you'll forget all about the level you just played through as soon as you move on to the next one. Luckily, some of the minigames that pop up in between levels are kinda decent. You got like bouncing volleyballs, there's a pseudo rhythm game, driving, just don't crash. Oh god, I'm gonna be sick. It's an unoffensive 1 hour long adventure that just kind of exists, and good for it. You know, you could do much worse. Atlantis SquarePants for console. A single player minigame collection with a story mode. I typically like when that happens. I feel like that's another gameplay style that doesn't really guarantee a super fun experience, but it has the potential, and what's presented here is fine. I mean, the variety is certainly there. You got tank sections, these little puzzle rooms with both SpongeBoy and Starman. You got on-rail shooting, rhythm sections. There's no shortage of things to do here. The problem though, much like Beach Party Cook-Off, is that each minigame way overstays its welcome. Like that puzzle stage I mentioned before, really fun for a minute, and it took me 20 minutes to finish. No thank you. There's certainly fun to be had with this one, just for the sake of its absurdity, but unfortunately, its poor pacing ruins any greatness this game would have gotten close to. Battle for Bikini Bottom, GBA. This is an interesting case of seeing the same game engine pop up, but getting a vastly different experience. Despite looking and playing almost exactly like Revenge of the Flying Dutchman from the actual bottom of this list, BFBB here is now a linear platformer, so easy points right there. That makes her a better product right off the bat. But the game is also a good exercise in restraint. Rather than focusing on some random gimmicks to carry the game along, this is a very by-the-books platformer with a bubble mechanic. You also got Destiny the Seahorse as a rideable mount, you got these auto-scrolling segments with the invisible boatmobile. Those are things that add variety while still having the game feel like SpongeBob SquarePants, and yes, that is clearly very important because many other games on this list just feel like SpongeBob is slapped into it, but here, by God, there's actual thought. On its own, it's clearly not going to set the world on fire, but in comparison to a lot of the other games on this list, this is a godsend. Breacher from the Krusty Carb on console. Like I said before, when it comes to this title, expect just a total fever dream. Like the version before it, you can expect the same thing here, sometimes frighteningly so. but this time it's in the form of a 3D platformer. Let's go! By this point in the series' history, there had already been an established format of what a good SpongeBob platformer is, but unfortunately, due to a change in developers, this is an adventure where the mechanics feel fine for the most part, but nothing really stands out as anything particularly good. And the tonal whiplash from level to level is honestly very jarring. One level you're driving a SpongeBob with a nightmare fuel face, then you're Super Patrick in a stage taking far too long with mind-numbing combat, and then you got these side-scrolling sections as Plankton being chased by a... what? This is a weird game. The novelty of not knowing what's gonna happen next does carry it through to the end. I will give the game that, because I was definitely enthralled, for better or for worse, but the lack of focus drives me crazy, and whoever drew that SpongeBob face should be in prison. Boating Bash for the Wii. In terms of the non-platformers in this franchise, no idea makes quite as much sense as putting this psychopathic driver who cannot get a license to save his life behind the wheel and expecting him to cause nothing but damage and destruction with a bunch of his friends, and damn it, that makes for a perfect game. This is actually a lot of fun. And it could have been terrible too, that's the crazy thing. This is a Wii exclusive, but miraculously, you do not need to use motion controls to drive. And in a game all about needing to be precise with hitting your opponents dead on in either an arena or a racetrack, the right steps were made to make this a genuinely fun driving game. I am Speckeldorfed. SpongeBob SquarePants Boating Bash turned out to be like a childish take on Twisted Metal, which, it's an insane comparison, but one that I'm more than happy to make. Actually, not a bad game. Super Sponge for the Game Boy Advance. Alright, now hear me out. This is one of the weirdest creations on this list, without a doubt, because while the game did release close to the same time as the PS1 version, something about the condensed nature of the handheld version just feels a lot better to me. There's a reasonable screen size to see everything around you, the lower resolution allows all of the sprites to appear uniform as opposed to whatever lack of consistency was in the console one, and any of the gimmicks that pop up do not interfere with the play control like the Reef Blower did, so it is a much more consistent experience as well. And hey, you got SpongeBob running through Bikini Bottom, killing things with a big karate hand. It's a surprisingly good time. It's stupid, but it's not terrible. It's only like 45 minutes long too, so I mean, whatever. I think I'm the only person out there who's gonna give this game as much praise as I have, but it's one of the most consistent SpongeBob games to date, and I can't believe I'm saying that. And for a first-year GBA game, that's all a miracle. Creature from the Krusty Krab for the Game Boy Advance. It's not every day the portable version of a game is the best version of that title, but considering how not good the DS version is, it's crazy that the GBA version is actually really solid. Aesthetically, both handheld versions are clearly identical. However, this is structured more like a traditional platformer with traditional controls. So combining that level of wackiness with a control scheme that doesn't make me want to gouge my eyes out with a Nintendo DS stylus, you know, I had fun. The fever dream nature of Creature from the Krusty Krab still leads to mass confusion as to why you're doing the things that you're doing, but like Super Sponge, having a much more condensed adventure with simpler mechanics at least makes this a fun little spectacle of a game, and one that, if you're deep into the SpongeBob video game rabbit hole like I was, it is actually worth checking out. I'll be damned. Truth or Square for consoles. Hot off the heels of Battle for Bikini Bottom and the movie game, Truth or Square is the final title in the video game trilogy created by Heavy Iron Studios, a team that really knew how to inject a lot of love, passion, atmosphere, and fan service into a SpongeBob 3D platformer. And while it's not as fondly remembered as the first two titles, there's still a lot of good here. On this grand adventure to relive memories of SpongeBob's past, you go out to do some of the typical platforming and battling that made the spongy platformers a worthwhile name in the first place. You run through jellyfish fields, you get to take down Robo Squidward, you inflate yourself with water. It's a cursed sight no matter how many times I've seen it. It's overall a very solid time, nothing is really outstanding though. Also, it's pretty short, and your moveset is a lot more limited than the previous games. You're reduced to just a few little power-ups this time around, and the overall linearity really docks the game a few points. It's a shame, because they had a formula nailed down perfectly before, and here, they really diluted it. Not for the best, it's still fine, but if you played the other big platformers in this franchise, it's still worth giving this game a shot, but only under that context. Lights, Camera, Pants for consoles. Now, typically, a minigame collection based off of a cartoon license really has no right to be as good as it is. And this is surprisingly okay. We've already gone over this with the likes of Atlantis SquarePants. You would think that a similar game would be just as bad, but no, it's not. There is a plot that attempts to tie things together, and the cutscenes are surprisingly well done, but who cares? This is simply put a really solid set of 30 minigames that are really well done. Working with a buddy to volley supplies in the Krusty Krab, fishing for beach balls for the highest score. Whatever the hell this is, there's no sort of board game or anything else to really glue this whole thing together besides the story mode, and I feel like going for the Mario Party vibe would have elevated the experience a whole lot more versus just doing minigames back to back to back, but regardless, I'm telling you, it shouldn't be fun, but damn it, it really is. There's so many other multiplayer games on this list that are absolute trash. Get a friend, put on lights, camera, pants, you're gonna have a good time. SpongeBob SquarePants. Here we have a WarioWare clone that was made for the U-Draw tablet, a touchpad peripheral for the Wii. Thank God this also got a 3DS port because man, what a way to ensure that your game gets played by like 10 people max. But no matter which console you play this game on, this is a really fun microgame experience that never really reaches the heights of the Wario games, but follows the formula close enough and injects enough quirkiness with the art style differences and the gameplay styles that it's surprising that there aren't more games out there in the entire gaming industry that attempted this same format. The biggest weakness is the lack of content. It only takes like maybe a half hour to get through the entire game, which is very unfortunate, and side content is practically non-existent, but just based on its style and the fact that what is here clearly had a lot of love thrown into it, this definitely deserves a spot high on this list. Cause quite frankly, Dude's Big Adventure for the U-Draw just ain't cutting it. This is the best game for that stupid tablet. Drawn to Life SpongeBob SquarePants Edition. A dream crossover realized. Drawn to Life has always been an underappreciated franchise for the DS, and to throw that idea into the SpongeBob world with Doodle Bob as the main antagonist, like, that's perfect, actually. That makes the most sense in the world. That's amazing. While this is another 2D platformer, the platforming isn't really the main selling point here. That's not what Drawn to Life is all about. It's fine, it's functional, very standard. There are indeed platforms to jump on, and if you want to get a little frisky, there are even some enemies that you can attack too, with your one button, one attack move. Oh man, it's crazy. By definition, this is a platformer. But Drawn to Life's big appeal has always been the customization, being able to draw so many different parts of the world, the platforms, the weapons. It's the only SpongeBob game where you can play as Sonic. That's way past cool. Taking an established formula and attaching an IP to it that actually makes sense is an underutilized concept in the entire industry, so it's worth celebrating whenever that happens. As a platformer, not gonna blow your mind. As an overall experience though, this one is a ton of fun. Doodle Bob should have been the antagonist in way more SpongeBob games. Give me a mihoy minoy in the chat if you agree. The movie game for the Game Boy Advance. This is the best SpongeBob game on this console, and while not perfect, this is really the only game on this handheld that really tries to nail everything, and it actually does a damn good job at it. It has the best art style of the bunch. The platforming, while not challenging, still tests your tried and true platforming skills with each level, which is way more than you can say for the previous entries. There's no weird BS gimmicks to spice things up just for the sake of it. This is just a genuinely pretty good side-scroller with a buddy-up mechanic, since Sponge and Star are together at all times. The movie game here is proof that you don't need to reinvent the wheel or really dumb things down just because it's a licensed property that's trying to follow a movie based on a cartoon to have a success. This is a really fun platformer that doesn't do anything crazy, but damn it, it sticks to a movie's plot, has good graphics, and it's fun. You get to platform on David Hasselhoff's 2-mile-long hairy body, and quite frankly, it's the best thing this franchise has ever done on the Game Boy Advance. It's only missing a chiptune rendition of I'm a Goofy Goober, but other than that, this is a pretty damn good title. Atlantis SquarePants for the DS. Honestly, we may be on a different console now, but a lot of what was just said about the movie game on GBA can be said about this one too. Now we have a 3D side-scroller with a buddy mechanic that takes place in some surprisingly detailed environments for this console. There are still some rough patches when it comes to like the combat, and there is an unfortunate amount of backtracking in otherwise straightforward levels, but the game still succeeds with the simple task of having you run around through underwater environments with fan-favorite characters. So many of these companies tried to really drive that point home in the worst way possible, but this game kept it simple, and that was for the best. And when there are mini games, and I was fearful they were going to be variety just for the sake of it, No. Not only do they provide a fun distraction, but they also don't overstay their welcome, which plagued so many other minigame options in this franchise. Without a doubt, this is the best adaptation of Atlantis SquarePants there is. It is the perfect example of avoiding the curse of being a jack of all trades and a master of none, while also being fairly ambitious for the console it was developed on, given that we have a decent 3D platformer here on a system that didn't really have all too many. Damn good stuff. But with that said, it really should come as no surprise that next up is Truth or Square for the DS. Yeah, so like, take what I said about Atlantis SquarePants and just say it's more refined with this one. This one, I'll be damned. People told me this was going to be the best one, and damn it, you were right. While the partner mechanic in the previous game was fine, maintaining a similar gameplay loop but relying solely on SpongeBob and expanding his moveset instead provides the best DS SpongeBob experience there is. Easily, no question, and considering once again, the console did not have a ton of 3D platformers, it's remarkable that SpongeBob has two. You do still have some unfavorable gimmicks from time to time, like some touchscreen stuff and even, God forbid, the microphone. But these worlds that you get to travel through are just genuinely fun to run around in. They're decently large in size, pretty good looking on the eyes too, let's be honest here. You got multiple collectibles to search for, once again some decent minigames as a break between the platforming stages, and even some decent boss battles. Like, there's so much about these games that should be absolute trash, but that's not the case. This developer knew what they were doing. It blows my mind that the DS version of Truth or Square is the best one. Like, not even by a little bit, by a lot. I'm very impressed. Truth or Square DS, fantastic game. There, I said it. I said the word fantastic. The movie game on console. I mean, of course, right? Like the Game Boy Advance version, this adventure does stick to the plot of the movie, of course, but even without that context, this is just an incredibly well-made 3D platformer. Really fun level designs in these very detailed worlds with great mechanics for both SpongeBob and Patrick. You got plenty of missions and challenges to sink your teeth into. A lot of driving sections that are surprisingly enjoyable. There are also like ability upgrade points, like what? The thing that the movie game has that many of the other platformers on this list lacked was pure polish. Yeah, the bosses aren't all that great, you do have to often replay stages to gather enough tokens to progress the story. This isn't a perfect game by any means, but it is definitely an adventure that punches well above its weight class. In a universe where licensed games are more often bad than not, especially since this is a game based on a movie based on a cartoon, that is a holy cow, this game is supposed to be terrible. This is a platformer where everything feels meticulously placed to ensure that this is a fun game from start to finish, and a licensed game second. Like, cool, it's based on a movie, whatever, here's a fun platformer. The one thing the GBA version has over this one is there's not as much hairy body platforming, but you know, you take the good with the bad. Though, realistically, we all already know that while this game is really fun in its own little bubble, this is better suited as a companion piece to Battle for Bikini Bottom on console, as well as its remake, Rehydrated. I mean, like, yeah, this is the SpongeBob game, right? We wouldn't even be here today acknowledging this franchise's game's existence at all if this one title didn't exist. While this is the foundation that would be used for the movie game that would come out right after it, what Battle for Bikini Bottom specifically did tremendously well was focus on the universe of SpongeBob as a whole, rather than simply being a reference or a series of references to any particular point in the show. The level design, the platforming, the game mechanics, those are definitely the star of the show here, but Bikini Bottom's environments make for a beautiful window dressing. All of that combined is what makes this a timeless classic. Sliding down sand mountains, multiple courses on SpongeBob's tongue, getting to run through Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy's superhero lair under their retirement home, that's awesome. You get to defend Sandy's tree dome from these robots while desperately clinging for water. Damn it, he needs it. And you don't play as just SpongeBob here, you also have Patrick, who can toss enemies around like they're nothing, and also Sandy with some really cool momentum-based swinging segments. This is a perfect melding of fan service and just flat-out fun platforming. Whether you're playing the original or the remake, these are games that, sure, may not rival some of the best the genre has to offer, but for anybody out there who is a platformer fan, or even remotely a SpongeBob fan, this game is well worth the praise that it gets. If anything, like, it's kind of annoying that they didn't get the voice actor correct for Mr. Krabs, and that's been weird all this time, and they didn't fix that in Rehydrated.
This flapping robot crisis is making the Krusty Krab lose money like a sinking ship.
That's very annoying, but I've come to terms with it. The Cosmic Shake for consoles and PC. Yeah, I really have no issues here saying that the Cosmic Shake is, without a doubt, the best SpongeBob game yet. Quite frankly, it's a game that shouldn't exist. Rehydrated's positive reception allowed for the creation of, essentially, a direct sequel to a nearly 20-year-old game. And in many ways, that's what this feels like, an incredibly polished PS2-era platformer, with a lot of modern finishes like fantastic lighting and great animated cutscenes. This game is awesome. And yes, I know that we have the movie game as a direct sequel to Battle for Bikini Bottom, but I'm gonna be honest with you, this game feels more like a sequel than that did. Working with the multiverse plot in the 2020s can certainly feel like a cliche trope, but it allows you to platform through so many varied worlds and time periods, from the distant past to the Wild West, Halloween Rock Bottom, along with a bunch of other appropriate costumes. Like, there are so many costumes here with so many references just based on the visuals, and that is so cool. And unlike the previous games that are so well loved, here you only play as SpongeBob, as opposed to also including Patrick or Sandy. But the moveset has been greatly expanded upon, so you never really need those extra characters in my opinion. SpongeBob feels great to control. There are so many things Mr. Robert Sponge can pull off in this one, with many challenges there to test your skills and reflexes in ways that even Battle for Bikini Bottom never got close to. There is a healthy level of backtracking through every single level, but that's where some of the cool challenges are. You get things from later on in the game, you go back and hey, there's a new thing to do, and you know what? It's not a total cakewalk. I'm impressed. Some elements of fan service do feel like straight up pandering, like there's the one guy who yells "my leg." He's just in there yelling it.
I can't feel my leg anymore.
But that's awesome. They got Mr. Krabs to sound like Mr. Krabs, and oh my god, I've been waiting so long for this. It sounds like Mr. Krabs. This is awesome.
And don't ye scam your hard-working consultant.
And then sometimes it will cut to a still of really ugly 2D artwork, and damn it, this is awesome too. From my perspective, as someone who has played almost every SpongeBob game out there, a lot of what makes Cosmic Shake good is knowing where we came from. This franchise has done so much bad that I almost thought maybe it's just because this is slightly competent, but no. As a modern platformer, this game really shines. This is the culmination of all of the highs and lows that got us to this point. We had to go through so much trash in the 20 years since Battle for Bikini Bottom proved that there could be a good game in this universe. It took a long time to get to this point, but I can safely put my name onto the Cosmic Shake being the best SpongeBob game ever made. So far. I have played way too many SpongeBob games out there, way more than any one man should. And with all of this unfortunate knowledge that I've accumulated, all jokes aside, it's been a fun ride. It was all for the sake of content, but I didn't totally hate my time doing this. So now with that being said, I have a plate of holographic meatloaf with my name on it that I'm gonna go enjoy right now. There's my reference quota for the day. Now I'm validated.